topic. Just today, out from Bloomberg.com, WAMU swaps auction sets a payoff of 43 cents on the dollar. So basically, you know, the 100% or the $300,000 mortgage was worth 43% of that, essentially. And the one thing in this article they said is that more than 500 banks, they're just talking about U.S. banks, more than 500 banks and investors signed up to settle credit default swaps based on the auction price, including units of AIG.
Yeah, so that's the run on the bank. You know,
Yeah,
if everybody wanted 100%, nobody could pay. At 43 cents, you know, people can pay. The thing that is key to remember is that, you know, even today, it was announced that banks are borrowing from the Federal Reserve $105 billion a day.
Is that more than they normally would?
Absolutely. I mean, it's you know, unbelievable. They are trying to stay afloat with this thing because...
So why do we care? We can just print more.
Well, yes, but then we end up devaluing the dollar, and it creates all sorts of problems as a result of this.
But again, why do? I mean, seriously, why do we care? The British pound is in the tank. The euro is right there with it. The Japanese yen is about all it's worth anything right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and that the question is how long that will be worth anything. I think that the world is looking to see what the U.S. is going to do with respect to this bailout. We are, as I mentioned last time I was here, our global national security depends on us shoring this up.
Well, I got to ask this question because this is on everyone's mind. Is the presidential election. We're a little tired of it, and I suspect the candidates are pretty tired too. But the question is, with the Enron debacle, the Wall Street bailout, what's next, and does it matter, Obama or McCain, does it matter who becomes president?
Well, I think that there's enough endorsements of Obama's economic plans, including Warren Buffett, and today Bernanke backing Obama. He's got some really good people around him, despite his own personal experience and knowledge and wisdom in the economic. What he is smart about is choosing the right people around him. You know, we're not what we do know is that John McCain surrounded himself with people like Phil Gramm, who said, you know, we're in a mental recession and America is nothing more than whiners. And of course, you don't see much of Phil Gramm these days. But I think that what it's brought into question, both as a vice presidential selection, is would Palin be able to handle the economic crisis any better than John McCain? Or are Obama and Biden better suited? And we'll see on November 4th.
Well, let's go to the bailout itself. In charge of the $700 billion bailout is Henry Paulson, who it seems like in all senses seems to be an honest person. However, there have been questions with regard to his potential for a conflict of interest. Just out of the Huffington Post, Paulson's conflict of interest sparked concern. This was from September of this year. While he was at Goldman Sachs, this is from a conservative columnist, by the way, Michelle Malkin. While he was at Goldman Sachs, the company was buying up a lot of Chinese banks in particular, and at the time of his nomination, there were very serious questions raised about the conflicts of interest involved and where his priorities are and who he's really looking after. That question has definitely come up in his bailout proposal.
Yeah, so first of all, we should point out that he is the former CEO of Goldman Sachs.
An investment banking firm.
Right, and one of the real...
Now in banking thanks to what they bought.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the real things of interest here and that Congress is looking into is that he chose to bail out a number of companies, but chose to let Lehman Brothers go under after 120 years. And there are emails that flew around Goldman Sachs saying that Lehman Brothers needed to go away and needed to go out of business. So there's real indication that there was an intentional effort, perhaps consciously or not so, by Paulson to favor his friends at Goldman Sachs.
Well, there's consolidation in every other business. Why not in investment banking, too?
Yeah, well, except that it impacts our entire global economy.
Let's go on to the article. This is another take, though, on potential conflict of interest. Instead of trying to stop mortgage foreclosures and stabilize the housing market with loans to homeowners facing foreclosure, a Treasury headed up by one of this period's leading investment bankers, Henry Paulson, focuses only on loans and other bailouts for institutions that borrowed huge amounts to invest recklessly in the securities and derivatives based on those mortgages. Let's go to the next quote. The more important issue is whether his former and future positions create a distorting prism for the bailout design. This crisis is ultimately driven by the failing housing market, and we will not finally get past it until the housing market stabilizes, which is why almost all economists say that we're probably only halfway through this crisis, and that is from the former Undersecretary of Commerce, Robert Shapiro. And actually, his point is one that I think is really, really valid. As honest as Henry Paulson may be, I don't see how he understands the impact on the average person and why they were the ones that needed to be taken care of.
Right. He's not getting his hands dirty. He's not down in the dirt with the average homeowner. Look, there's enough blame to go around with all of this. To be real honest with you, I wouldn't want to be in Henry Paulson's shoes for anything at this point in time. This thing is so interconnected that the housing market, people got into homes that they couldn't afford on the promise from their mortgage broker, that it was going to be okay. As you know.
Yeah, let's go to the picture of the American dream right now, but let's continue on.
As you know, the fact is that most of the small print in those mortgage documents, are very complicated to understand. And, there was lots of credit available. So it was really sort of a house of cards. I think that what Henry Paulson is looking at is where's the biggest opportunity for the dike to break. And that's the Wall Street firms. Now,
but let me ask this. If the Wall Street firms go down, so what?
Yeah, so what? It's going to be absolutely amazing. You will have layoffs. I mean, part of the problem with this is companies, corporations, much like the homeowner who borrowed from paycheck to paycheck in order to pay their mortgage, corporations rely on commercial paper. And that commercial paper are short-term loans that allow them to get from quarter to quarter or paycheck to paycheck.
But they're funded by investors.
Well, they're funded by investment banks. And so,
but who funds the investment banks?
Right now, it's Henry Paulson and $700 billion.
Okay,
I mean,
got it.
But the point is that what Henry Paulson is trying to do is loosen up the credit markets. By doing that, then corporations will survive. Corporations survive. People can continue to have their jobs. People continue to have their jobs. Mortgages will not fail at a more rapid rate.
So this
we're
is
not in a
trickle-down.
good situation. Yeah, this is a major, major, major crisis we're facing.
Let me ask you this. Trickle-down can work, but there definitely have to be some constraints. In the bailout dollars that was forced upon some of the biggest banks, because Ken Lewis was talking about that, the Bank of America president, just the other day, is there anything that tells in the bailout that tells those banks that you must loan that to small businesses for home loans, or are the banks free to invest it in oil securities, for example?
Well, first of all, banks are regulated, so the regulators are going to be looking very closely at how they use this. But, I mean, if we look at the bailout of AIG, for example, the very next week they're at a resort for $500,000. They then went on a golfing retreat. The CEOs went on a golfing retreat.
But that's the way business is done.
Well, exactly, but that's on the backs of us taxpayers.
Oh.
The problem is, in many ways, Hank Paulson, when he first proposed a $700 billion bailout, said, I want all the control to decide how it gets doled out. I don't think that we will have enough controls on this. I think that's some of the fear. For instance, AIG, of the $122 billion that we said we would loan them, they're already at about 2/3 of that amount, and they've only been able to have that credit line for about 30 days. So it's a mess. I mean, and I don't think that we'll be able to tell. I think it's an absolute necessity on this, because otherwise it's behind this $700 billion is going to be another $700 billion.
Wow, but there is a way out, and Lynn Brewer is going to tell us about it here right after this break. If you want to learn more about Lynn, go to theintegrityinstitute.com. You're going to learn an awful lot. You're going to find out how the knowledge that she gained at Enron is helping her